Ride the signal through the unknown. This is the cryptic current.
The ink was still wet. He had just finished reading the book an hour before. A story about a librarian who vanished in 1932 after discovering a volume that wrote itself. Now, a new sentence had appeared. The air grew heavy with the scent of old paper and something metallic, like ozone after a storm. From the darkness between the stacks, a soft scratching began, not like a pen, but like fingernails on wood. His breath hitched. The book wasn't just a story, it was a ledger, and his name was being written into it in real time. The last wet line began to smear, as if an unseen hand was already editing the ending. Chapter 23. Sarah's final breath. Tonight, what if you checked out a book and it started writing itself? What if the new chapters were about you and the final page was a countdown? A woman named Sarah reads frantically, her eyes darting across the page. A clock's hands crawl toward midnight, each tick a heavy beat in the quiet room. The book lies abandoned on a park bench, its leather cover slick with evening damp. In the next instant, the bench stands empty. The book has vanished without a trace. For some, it's a warning. Cedar Ridge, Ohio, population 8, 742, a town where time seemed to stand still, its routines as fixed as the faded street signs. For Sarah Miller, Thursday meant the same ritual, clocking out from the clinic, then heading to the library. The air carried the faint, metallic scent of ozone, mingling with the damp chill that clung to the evening. Her footsteps echoed hollowly, the only sound breaking the heavy stillness that had settled over Main Street. The library was her sanctuary, a quiet refuge from the world outside. Sarah, 32, with kind features but weary eyes, traced her fingers along the fiction spines. She offered a faint smile to Mrs. Peabody, the septuagenarian librarian who'd tended these shelves for decades. This place was part of her recovery, a fragile piece she desperately needed to hold. A bad breakup, a career in limbo. The smell of old paper and quiet was her therapy. That Thursday, she was looking for an escape. A fat, forgettable fantasy novel. Her fingers traced the leather spines, then halted at an empty space, her brow furrowed, noticing something tucked behind a heavy atlas. She pulled out a slender, black volume, its spine unmarked. The cool, dry leather felt alien against her skin, smelling faintly of old paper and dust. She wrenches it free. The cold is unnatural, metallic, like holding a sliver of winter in her hands. But the library had its own intentions. It offered a different choice, a book without a title, its cover blank and ancient. The air around it grows heavy, smelling faintly of old paper and something else, a sharp, coppery tang. On the cover, just a single embossed symbol, an Ouroboros, a serpent devouring its own tail. Sarah opened it. The first page bore 3 simple words: for the seeker. Inside, the prose flowed, beautiful yet melancholic, describing a woman standing at a crossroads under a bruised twilight sky. An immediate, strange connection seized her, the words seeming to whisper directly to her soul. Sarah's apartment, usually a sanctuary of soft lamplight and warmth, now felt unnaturally still. The air carried the faint, acrid scent of ozone, like the aftermath of a lightning strike, making the silence feel sharp and brittle. Every creak of the old building's timbers, every distant hum from the street below, seemed amplified and deliberate. It was the quiet before the storm, a tangible pressure building in the cozy space, promising an escalation that was already in motion. Night. She's curled on the sofa, utterly absorbed. Narrator. The book was hypnotic. It wasn't a tale of some imagined hero. It was a chronicle, a biography of a woman named Clara. Clara, a nurse by profession, had recently severed ties with a man named Dave. Her residence was apartment 4B, the very same unit number as Sarah's. That apartment number wasn't just an address, it was her occupation. Sarah's face went ashen as the realization struck her. The book slipped from her trembling fingers, its weight forgotten. It struck the floorboards with a dull, final thud. There it lay, splayed open to the very passage she had been reading. The text was unnervingly specific, detailing the exact fracture pattern in her ceiling from last winter's leak. Coincidence is a fragile shield. That shield shattered completely when she turned to the final written chapter. Clara, or Sarah in this borrowed flesh, returned home with the book, its blank pages waiting like an open grave. She had unwittingly claimed the narrative, becoming both author and protagonist in a story not yet written. The scent of old paper and something metallic like ozone before a storm hung in the still room. As she turned a page, the silence thickened, heavy with the weight of unwritten horrors yet to unfold. But not for long. The next evening, Sarah returned from work to find the book lying open on her coffee table. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. She was certain she had left it safely on the shelf. A faint scent of old paper and something metallic, like cold iron, hung in the air. The only sound was the slow, steady drip of a faucet from the kitchen, each drop echoing in the heavy silence. Chapter 15. The page, once blank, now held writing. It chronicled her day with unnerving precision. The difficult patient, Mr. Hendricks, the cherry Danish at lunch, even the strange call from an unrecognized number. All of it was now inscribed in elegant, looping script. Sarah tried to throw it away, stuffing it deep into a dumpster down the street. The next morning, It lay on her kitchen counter. A faint odor of garbage and dampness clung to its cover. A new chapter chronicled her frantic panic, her desperate trip to the dumpster, and her fitful, haunted sleep. It was learning, adapting. The chapters grew longer, more detailed, their prose thickening with a palpable, creeping dread. They began to speculate. The line read, "Clara considers calling David." Sarah had not considered it, but reading those words planted the idea, and now the urge felt overwhelming. She tried to burn the journal in her sink, but the flame wouldn't touch it. It danced away from the pages as if repelled by some invisible force. The paper felt unnaturally cold and slick under her fingers, like wet stone, and the air carried the faint scent of ozone and old rot. When she tried to tear a page, it resisted with a low, fibrous rasp, as if the fibers themselves were fused together by something unnatural. A heavy dread settled in her chest, her breath catching, as she realized this object wasn't just old. It was wrong, and it refused to be destroyed. The leather cover grew unnaturally warm in her hands. Then a sharp, static shock jolted through her fingers. Desperate, Sarah rushed to the library, the air thick with the scent of old paper and dust. She found Mrs. Peabody among the towering shelves, her voice dropping to a frantic, breathless whisper. Where did this come from? Who donated it? Sarah's words were barely audible, laced with a primal dread. Peabody's voice remained unnervingly calm as he sorted his cards, not even glancing up. He spoke of the book as one might a stray cat. "Oh, that old thing? It's been here forever. It comes and goes." His words hung in the air, laced with a quiet acceptance of the impossible. Then, with a finality that carried the weight of experience, he added, "Some books just don't stay on the shelves they're assigned to." Mrs. Peabody's gaze locked onto Sarah's, and in that moment, Sarah saw a profound, sorrowful depth. The air in the quiet library grew thick, carrying the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic. "Some people," Mrs. Peabody whispered, her voice a dry rustle, "are simply more interesting to read than others, dear." A cold, damp sensation prickled at Sarah's skin as the words settled, heavy with unspoken meaning. Sarah's apartment was now a labyrinth of scattered papers and abandoned meals, a physical manifestation of her unraveling mind. The book lay permanently open on her desk, its pages no longer static but living entities. A metallic scent, like ozone and old copper, hung in the still air whenever a new passage materialized. It had ceased to be a mere object. The book had become a mirror, reflecting a reality that was writing itself into existence around her. A prophet, and then a director. Chapter 21. Clara walked to the old bridge at the edge of town at 8 p.m., her steps drawn by an unseen force toward the railing. A metallic scent of damp iron rose from the churning river as a cold, clinging mist brushed her skin. She felt a physical pull to look down, a deep, gravitational tug in her chest that seemed to emanate from the rushing depths. Sarah, reading these words, felt the same visceral pull seize her own body, the text's command bypassing her mind entirely. She fought it, staying home as sweat beaded on her skin and nausea twisted her gut. The next chapter of the book seemed to scold her directly from the page. "Clara disobeys," it read, the words carrying a tangible weight in the stagnant air. The narrative itself grew strained, the very atmosphere tightening like a noose around the room. Consequences must be woven, and her life began to fray with eerie precision. Small, inexplicable accidents became her new reality. Her car battery died without cause, leaving her stranded in the damp night air. Then her keys vanished for days, only to reappear in the freezer, coated in a thin layer of frost. The narrative was correcting itself, punishing her divergence. The book lay open to a fresh page, the heading stark and final. Chapter 22. The offer. Then came the offer. A cold, damp scent of old paper and ozone filled the air as the book proposed its bargain. "A life, fully written," it whispered with the sound of rustling pages, "is a life without uncertainty." The promise was seductive. A reunion with David, a promotion, peace. It whispered of a serene ending, if only she would surrender. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and old paper, the only sound a distant, rhythmic drip. A primal dread took hold, the sticky cold of the floor seeping through her clothes as the choice crystallized. Sarah sat hollow-eyed in the dark, weighing the terror of freedom against the comfort of a plotted path. The air in the room felt thick and stale, carrying the faint scent of old paper and dust. Her fingers traced the book's cold cover, the decision to become Clara hanging in the oppressive quiet. Outside, a distant branch scraped against the window, the only sound breaking the heavy stillness of the night. She turned to the final written page, and a scream tore from her throat. But as her gaze lifted and looked ahead, she saw the true price of a serene ending. Chapter 23 whispered its grim truth into the stale, cold air. It was never about happiness. A single, stark sentence. Book text. Chapter 23. Clara's final breath. Tonight. Sarah's gaze drifted to the clock. Sarah snatched the book, her fingers leaving damp prints on the ancient leather. She fled her apartment, the scent of ozone clinging to her clothes as she descended the stairwell. The sleeping town passed in a blur of streetlights and whispering trees as she drove, then ran. Her terror wasn't from a monster, but from the story itself, a plotline that was now hunting her. With a desperate heave, She flings the book from the old bridge into the ink-black water below. She stumbles backward, her frame shaking with ragged, relieved sobs. The distant clock tower chimes a solitary note, marking 11:47, then falls silent. In the sudden quiet, broken only by the damp chill in the air, she is alive. She draws a ragged breath, the suffocating dread finally beginning to recede. Turning toward home, she takes one tentative step, then another, the damp path crunching softly underfoot. And then she freezes. There, directly in her path, bathed in the sterile, blue-white glare of a street lamp, lies the book. It rests there, impossibly, unnervingly dry amidst the night's moisture, a silent, impossible accusation. The journal lay pristine before her, open to a fresh, final page. Sarah approached, an unseen force compelling her forward as the camera peered over her shoulder. But the page was no longer about Clara. The words had shifted, now written in a chilling first person. The water felt shockingly frigid against my skin. Yet the story itself is a patient, predatory thing. It possesses a quiet, relentless gravity, always seeking its destined reader. What we call an ending is merely the opening of another, darker chapter. And every chapter needs a setting. Sarah lifted her gaze from the page. The world around her dissolved, its edges bleeding away like watercolor on wet paper. Only the book in her hands remained in sharp, terrifying focus. She was no longer in Cedar Ridge. She remains trapped within the collapsing story itself. The camera pulls back, revealing her as a stark outline against a reality slowly unraveling into nothingness. A metallic scent, like old coins and ozone, hangs thick in the air. Then, the scene solidifies into the stark, sunlit quiet of the Cedar Ridge Library. Peabody was reshelving books when she paused in the fiction section. There was a gap in the row. Her fingers slid behind a heavy atlas and brushed against something. She pulled out a leather-bound book, its surface strangely cold and slick. Her fingers traced the cover's worn leather, settling it into place with unsettling reverence. The air carried the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic. "Finished that one, did you?" Mrs. Peabody whispered to the empty room, her voice a dry rustle. "Good. Plenty more shelves to fill." She placed the Ouroboros-bound book atop the new arrivals cart, its metallic scales catching the library's dim light. The first page now bore a simple inscription: "For the Seeker." Our camera drifted through the hushed stacks, passing a student drowning in textbooks, a solitary old man, a businessman staring blankly into space. None of them noticed the peculiar volume, resting in plain sight. Some stories are hungry. They don't want to be read. They want to be lived. They wait in the quiet places, between the bestsellers and the forgotten histories. The air there is stale, smelling of old paper and slow decay. They look for someone at a crossroads, someone seeking direction. In the final shot, the new arrivals cart stands alone in the dim light. A hand enters the frame. It's Mike, looking weary and curiously drawn. His fingers brush the leather spine, and the air suddenly carries a faint scent of ozone and decay. A low, electrical hum begins to resonate through the shelves, as if the book itself had been holding its breath. He pauses, his fingers registering the book's unnatural chill before pulling it free. He opens it, the pages releasing a scent of ozone and old rot into the still air. As his eyes trace the first lines, a heavy dread settles in his chest, his breath catching in his throat. So the next time you're in a library, in a secondhand shop, and you find a book with no title, ask yourself, are you choosing the story? The camera pushes in on Mike's face, a faint, intrigued smile touching his lips as he reads the first, perfectly tailored sentence: "Narrator." Or is the story choosing you? Mike's breath hitches as the implications settle. The air grows heavy with the scent of ozone and ancient paper. A single, sharp footstep echoes from the hallway beyond.
If the signal hooked you, subscribe and catch the next ripple.